Born in the madness of World War I, tanks emerged as a crucial new type of weapon. Initially, not much more than a rolling box of metal, tanks quickly proved their worth on the battlefield, mowing down infantry lines while protecting their occupants from returned fire. But the World War I tanks were horrendously crude, and in practice, death traps for anyone unlucky enough to get into one. Tank development was slow for most of the world during the interwar period. So by the time World War II broke out, many nations were forced to rapidly develop new types of tanks in order to stay competitive on the battlefield. This rapid development led to some incredible military machines, many of which are legendary today as icons of the tank world. In this video, we listed the top 10 best tanks of World War II. Enjoy! Number 10 is the Churchill. The Churchill was rushed into production to build up British defenses against a possible German invasion in 1941. 40 tons of weight made it one of the heaviest Allied tanks of the war, but the major flaw was its engine. It only had 350 brake horsepower. It was not enough for such a heavy tank, making it very slow. The armor had a maximum thickness of 102 mm in the early versions. This was increased in the Mark VII to 152 mm on its front. It had many specialist versions, such as the Churchill Crocodile, which was equipped with a hull machine gun and a flamethrower. Number 9 is the Tiger II. It was the successor to the Tiger I, combining thick armor with the sloping used on the Panther. The tank weighed almost 70 tons, but had the same engine which powered the much lighter Panther and Tiger. It made the Tiger II underpowered like many other heavy tanks of the war. On top of that, it was developed late in the war, and the production was severely disrupted by Allied bombing raids, resulting in only about 500 tanks being built. The first 5 Tiger IIs delivered in 1944 on the Eastern Front broke down before they could be used in combat, and they were destroyed to prevent capture. Nevertheless, it was a very dangerous weapon. Number 8 is the KV-1. It made German soldiers almost powerless. Actually, in some situations, even a single tank supported by infantry was capable of halting large German formations, equipped mainly in Panzer Is and IIs. Generally, the KV was about twice as heavy as the heaviest German tank in 1941. As the war progressed, it became evident that there was little sense in producing the expensive KV, as the T-34 performed better and used the same cannon. Furthermore, at 50 tons, it was simply too heavy and difficult to steer. This severely impacted the maneuverability, not much in terms of speed, but its inability to cross bridges. Interestingly, later it became a base for the IS series of tanks. Number 7 is the IS-2. Its up to 150 mm thick armor could withstand hits from the German 88 mm cannon. Furthermore, its 122 mm main cannon was capable of defeating Tigers from about 1.5 kilometers. It was slightly lighter than the Panther and had a lower silhouette, making it harder to destroy. The IS-2 proved its effectiveness during the first battle in February 1944 in Ukraine. A single unit of 10 IS-2s from the 72nd Regiment engaged and destroyed no less than 41 German tanks. From 1943 to 1945, around 4,000 were produced. Number 6 is the Panzer III. This 20 tons medium tank was intended to serve alongside Panzer IVs as the primary battle tanks of the German forces. Actually, during the campaigns in Poland and France, it was very successful. However, when it met the KV-1 and T-34 tanks, it proved to be inferior in both armor and gunpowder. To meet the growing needs to counter these tanks, the Panzer III was upgunned with a more powerful 50 mm cannon. But still, with its maximum 5 cm thick armor, this was not enough to effectively fight the Russian tanks. Production ended in 1943, with almost 6,000 built. But its chassis proved to be very reliable, so the Germans used it to build many other vehicles, like the tank destroyer called the Stug III, which was the most effective armored vehicle during the whole conflict, destroying over 20,000 armored vehicles. Number 5 is the Panzer IV. It was a significant component of the German armored formations in every stage of the war. It was the only German tank to remain both in production and combat throughout the entire conflict. On top of that, it could easily be modified to effectively fight against enemy tanks. The unanticipated appearance of the KV-1 and T-34 prompted an upgrade of the Panzer IV's 75mm cannon. This meant that it could now destroy T-34 at ranges of up to 1,200 meters at any angle. Its chassis was used as a base for many other vehicles, including the Panzer IV tank destroyer. The Panzer IV was widely exported, with around 300 sold to Finland, Romania, Spain, and Bulgaria. Number 4 is the Tiger I. The Tiger I was an outstanding design for its time. Equipped with an excellent 88mm cannon and thick armor, this tank was over-engineered using expensive materials and labor-intensive production methods. Because of this, only 1,347 tanks were built. It was prone to certain types of track failures and breakdowns, expensive to maintain, and limited in range by its high fuel consumption. However, its thick armor made the Tiger almost impervious to frontal fire from enemy tanks, but against the Allied production numbers, even a 10-to-1 kill ratio was not sufficient. These numbers must be set against the cost of a single Tiger. Every tank cost as much to build as 4 Stug III assault guns. Number 3 is the M4 Sherman. It evolved from the M3 medium tank. The M4 retained much of the previous mechanical design, but placed the main 75mm cannon in a fully traversing turret. Some Shermans were produced with a more capable variant of the 76mm M1 cannon, or refitted with a 17-pounder by the British. The M4 proved to be reliable, relatively cheap to produce, and available in great numbers. Thousands were distributed through the Lend-Lease program to Allied nations. It gave them numerical superiority in most battles. After the war, many improved and upgraded versions appeared, like the Israeli Super Sherman, which took part in both the Suez Crisis and the Six-Day War. Number 2 is the Panther. It was intended to counter the T-34 and replace the Panzer III and IV. Nevertheless, it served alongside them until the end of the war. Its excellent 75mm cannon, which had more penetrating power than the Tiger's 88, could easily destroy T-34s from over 1,500 meters. Furthermore, its frontal sloped armor was very efficient, but the trade-off were weaker sides, which were around 40mm thick. This made the Panther vulnerable to flanking fire. It was rushed into combat at the Battle of Kursk, despite numerous unresolved technical problems, which led to higher losses. Later, most design flaws were rectified by the Germans. The bombing of production plants and shortage of crucial materials caused that only 6,000 were produced. Number 1 is the T-34. At its introduction, the T-34 possessed an unprecedented combination of firepower, mobility, protection, and ruggedness. As the war went on, it became more capable, but also quicker and cheaper to produce. The T-34 had well-sloped armor and a relatively powerful V12 diesel engine, giving it a top speed of 53 km per hour. The initial version had a powerful 76.2mm cannon, but in 1944, a second major version began production, the T-34-85, with a larger 85mm cannon. The Soviet industry would eventually produce over 80,000 tanks of all variants. Although its armor and armament were surpassed later in the war, it's often been credited as the most effective, efficient, and influential tank design of the Second World War. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Also, visit our second channel with military power comparisons. See you next time!